This video tutorial is all about food production. You need to understand how the use of fertilizers can increase crop yields, and also the reasons for pest control and the advantages and disadvantages of using pesticides and biological control with crop plants. Now, fertilizers provide the elements required for plants to grow well, such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And the way that this happens is the fertilizers increase the soil fertility. And this fundamentally makes the crops grow faster and bigger so that yields are increased. Now, the compounds used must be water soluble. And this is because plants need to be able to absorb these compounds through their roots via active transport. Now, there are three key elements that are included in these fertilizers then. Firstly, nitrogen. Nitrogen is absorbed in the form of nitrates. Nitrates help plants produce amino acids that form proteins, which are going to increase the plant's biomass and therefore growth. If you have insufficient nitrates in a plant, you're going to have poor growth, and actually you see the leaves start to turn yellow. Secondly, we have phosphorus. Now, this is absorbed in the form of phosphates, and phosphates are needed to make DNA and cell membranes. Phosphates help plants convert amino acids into protein to increase biomass and growth. And they also help increase the rate of respiration to release energy for growth. If a plant has insufficient phosphorus, the plant will generally turn dark green. So both the leaves and the stems will appear dark green, and they'll also appear sort of stunted. Older leaves are affected first and may acquire a sort of purple or purplish discoloration. In some cases, the leaf tips will brown and die, and they'll sort of appear weak. And also you might see maturity is delayed. Finally, we have potassium in these fertilizers, and potassium is absorbed in the form of various compounds of potassium, and it regulates the opening and closing of stomata to allow carbon dioxide uptake for photosynthesis. Potassium allows or enables enzyme reactions to occur that produce energy in the form of ATP to facilitate active transport of mineral ions from the soil. Insufficient potassium can cause poor growth of flowers and fruits, as well as discoloration of the leaves. We're now going to look at pest control and the advantages and disadvantages of using pesticides and biological control with crop plants. So pest control is referring to the use of pesticides to control pests from consumption or sort of damaging the plants. Pests such as insects and other animals can damage crops by eating them. Weeds can outcompete crop plants for space, for water, and for soil nutrients. Fungi can infect crop plants and spread disease, which can affect growth and yield. All of these can be controlled by pesticides, which are sort of chemical control methods, or by introducing other species. So that's like a biological control. There are three types of pesticides you need to be aware of. So firstly, we have insecticides, which kill insect pests, herbicides, which kill plant pests, and fungicides, which kill fungal pests. Now, this table just summarizes some of the advantages and disadvantages of using pesticides. So as you can see, some of the advantages are that they're easily accessible and relatively cheap. They can have an immediate effect, and they kill the entire population of pests. However, organisms that they are sort of intended to kill can develop resistance to them, and therefore the pesticides are no longer effective. They are not specific chemicals, and so can actually kill other organisms which would have otherwise benefited the crops. So, for example, they might kill bees, which are really important in plant pollination. They can be persistent chemicals, so it means that they don't sort of break down, and as a result, they can start accumulating sort of in higher and higher concentrations later down the food chain, which can actually end up harming the top predators. And this is known as bioaccumulation. So in some cases, for example, you might see the sort of crops being eaten by insects, the insects being eaten by sort of like small mammal species, and then the small mammal species being eaten by larger mammal species, and then that large mammal species, for example, a bear, then unfortunately dying through this process of bioaccumulation. And another disadvantage is you need to apply these pesticides repeatedly in order for them to actually be effective. So the other option is biological control, and this can happen entirely naturally. So, for example, ladybirds eat aphids. Now, usually a species is introduced specifically to prey on the pest species. So, for example, a parasitic wasp can control whitefly in greenhouse sort of tomato crops. They are based on a sort of predator-prey cycle, so they don't completely remove the pest, but will keep it at lower levels. Again, there's a range of advantages and disadvantages of using biological control methods, and these are summarised in the table on the slide in front of you. Firstly, it's sort of like more natural than using a pesticide, so you're not going to develop that same level of resistance within the pests. You can target specific species through this method, and usually the method itself is longer lasting. You're not going to have to apply the sort of predator as many times as you would a pesticide. And so, yeah, it doesn't need to be repeatedly applied. The disadvantage is that the predator that you've introduced may eat other organisms instead of the pest itself, and it can take a longer period of time to be effective. You can't kill the entire population of pests, so you're always going to have some pests present, which will reduce your crop yield. And the predators may not adapt to the sort of new environment, and they also might move out of the area. You introduce ladybirds, they might just fly off. Equally, the ladybird itself, or the sort of biological control method you're using, might become a pest in itself.